And welcome to our webinar, Booklist's Graphic Novel Panel Part 1, the next installment in our series of special programs in celebration of our third annual Graphic Novels in Libraries Month. I'm Sarah Hunter, Booklist's Books for Youth and Graphic Novels editor. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Also, Booklist will now be offering closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar mentioned above. From there, you can select Show or Hide Subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting Subtitle Settings. Last but not least, a link to today's title list was included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download it, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. You can also download the title list by copying the URL on this screen into your web browser. Today, we are joined by Jennifer L. Holm and Savanna Ganucheau, creators of Turtle in Paradise, which published on June 29th, Nidhi Chanani, creator of Jukebox, which published on June 22nd, Huda Fahmy, creator of HUDA F ARE YOU, coming November 2nd, Molly Knox Ostertag, creator of The Girl from the Sea, which released on June 1st, and Dan Abdo and Jason Patterson, creators of BARB The Last Berserker, coming September 28th. Before we kick off our panel conversation, we'll first hear from each of these amazing creators about their most recent titles. We'll start with Jenny Holm and Savannah. Jennifer is a New York Times bestselling author and 3-time Newbery Honor recipient. She is a co-creator of the Baby Mouse series, which is an Eisner Award winner, the Squish series, and the Sunny graphic novels, which she collaborates on with her brother, Matthew Holm. Savannah is a comic artist from New Orleans with a BFA in film from the University of New Orleans. She got her start in comics by self-publishing and selling her work in small comic book shops around the city. Alongside creating the popular webcomic George and Johnny, Savannah's artwork has appeared in notable publications including Gem and Holograms, Adventure Time Comics, and Lumberjanes. Her first graphic novel, Bloom, is published by First Second. Take it away, Jennifer and Savannah.
Hello, I'm so excited. We are so excited to be here talking to you about Turtle in Paradise. I'm actually zooming into you from the locale where Turtle takes place. I'm actually in Key West. Turtle in Paradise takes place in Key West, Florida, and I was originally inspired to write the novel that the graphic novel is based on because my great-grandmother, Jenny Lewin, came from the Bahamas in the late 1800s and settled in Key West, and so I wanted to explore that side of my family. It was one of the most requested books from fans of mine over the years that somebody please turn it into a graphic novel, so I was thrilled when Savannah agreed to do the adaptation.
Yeah, and I was so happy to take that on as well. I read the book and just loved it. It really connected with me. I was a big fan of historical fiction when I was in middle school, and I was just really excited to bring Turtle's world to life. And I worked with an amazing colorist like Pian to bring Key West in the 30s to its fruition in the book, and I think, you know, we made something I'm really happy with. There was quite a bit of learning to do about that time period and learning about Key West as well. I've never been there. I still have not been there, but I'm really hoping maybe in the coming years to go. And I'm just really happy with, you know, how the graphic novel turned out, and I hope that you enjoy it if you pick it up.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer and Savannah. We'll now hear from Nidhi Chanani. Nidhi was born in Kolkata, India, and raised in California. She creates illustrations that capture love in everyday moments, which are often featured at Disney parks. In 2012, she was honored by the Obama administration as a champion of change. She's the author of Pashmina, Shivratri Dost, Good Night Friend, and illustrator of I Will Be Fierce. Nidhi draws and dreams in the San Francisco Bay Area with her husband and kid. And you can find her work on everydayloveart.com. Welcome, Nidhi. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. So my recent graphic novel release is Jukebox, and I'm hoping I can share my screen. I have a small presentation, not really presentation, I guess. Okay, here we go. Are you able to see that? Yes, I hope so.
Yes.
Okay, great. So Jukebox is a middle grade graphic novel featuring two cousins, Shahi and Naz. Shahi is there with the red satchel. And they are two cousins who really love to spend time together. And but one afternoon, they start kind of getting worried about the fact that their Shahi's dad hasn't come home in a night. And so they kind of get this idea to go searching for him. And their search takes them to an attic in a record store in San Francisco, which is where this is based. And they find this jukebox there. And so as kids do, they decide to use it. And they don't know that this jukebox is magical. And so when they put a record in the jukebox and they turn it on, it takes them back in time. And so their journey takes them to the 30s and the Great Depression, as well as a Women's March in DC in the 70s or late 60s, and as well as Chicago in the 70s and in the 80s in Venice Beach. So they have a lot of different eras that they visit through the music that they put on to the jukebox. And they're continually searching for Shahi's dad, trying to figure out where he might be stuck in history. And so that came out, a month ago now. And so that is the book, and I'm very excited. It's been so I can stop sharing, sorry. This is a little different for me, but so it was a really fun project. I really wanted to capture that love that cousins have together, and that idea of how music impacts both history and our memories and connects us to our family and those memories and history. And so that's Jukebox. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. Next up is Huda Bahami. Huda grew up in Dearborn, Michigan, and has loved comics since she was a kid. She attended the University of Michigan, where she majored in English. She taught English to middle and high schoolers for 8 years before she started writing about her experience as a visibly Muslim woman in America, and was encouraged by her older sister to turn these stories into comics. Huda, her husband Jihad, and their son reside in Houston, Texas. Thanks for joining us today, Huda.
Hello, thanks for having me. My name is Huda, and this is my YA debut, Huda F Are You. I am very excited and proud for people to read this story. I came up with the title, which always makes people laugh, when I was in high school, and that's where this takes place, or it takes place during freshman year of character Huda's life. And I always thought it was such a funny coincidence that was my parents didn't think about it when they named me Huda, and that my last name was Fahmy. And so I always thought it was hilarious, and now I get to use it as a title. And this book kind of takes you through the life of a Muslim American going to school and trying to figure out who she is. It's your traditional coming of age, identity, and struggling with identity story. The thing that makes it so difficult for Huda is that she's struggling with so many different types of identities. And by the way, I talk about her in third person because while this is based on life experiences, it is not autobiographical, it is a work of fiction. So you will hear me refer to Huda as third person. But anyway, so she goes through her life based again on a lot of my experiences of struggling with who she is. Is she Muslim? Is she American? Who is she in her, is she Arab? Who is she in her community? Who is she at school? She goes from a school where she was the only hijabi, the only one who wore the scarf, to a school now where everybody, pretty much wears it, and she can no longer rely on her hijab to define her. And she realizes that was something she had done back at her old school. And so now she kind of tries to figure out, well, where does she fit in? Is she into fashion? Is she a gamer? Is she an athlete? Is she just really smart? Is she just sarcastic and that be her whole personality? The story also goes on to talk about some of the internalized Islamophobia that Huda faces, and her struggle with that, and realizing, trying to figure out who she is really comes down to figuring out who she isn't. And so I'm very excited for everyone to get a chance to read this story. This is the kind of representation that I always wished that I could read about when I was younger, and I'm excited for readers all over to be able to hopefully relate and enjoy as well. Thank you so much for having me. Can't wait to answer your questions later.
Thank you so much, Huda. Our next panelist is Molly Knox Ostertag. Molly is the New York Times bestselling author and illustrator of the acclaimed Witch Boy trilogy, The Witch Boy, The Hidden Witch, and The Midwinter Witch, as well as a writer for animation. A graduate of the School of Visual Arts, Molly was featured in the Forbes 30 Under 30 media list in 2020. She lives in Los Angeles with her wife, 2 cats, and a very cuddly dog. You can visit her online at mollyostertag.com. Take it away, Molly.
Hi, thank you. And I have a cat and a dog in here right now, so they might make a guest appearance. Hi, I'm Molly. I am the author of the Witch Boy series and the recent Girl from the Sea. I am really interested in telling stories that are set in our world, but that have magical elements in them. I think that I've sort of realized this as I've like made more stories, that they all come back to learning to love yourself and learning to be good to the people that you love as well, with a real focus on exploring queer identity and exploring the unique ways that queer people sort of like love ourselves and love our community. I am also very interested in making stories where the heroes are characters who don't usually get to be the main characters. So focusing on protagonists who maybe haven't had their stories told before. The Witch Boy series is about a young boy named Aster who lives in a family where everyone has magic. It's very gendered. Women are witches, men are shapeshifters. But Aster, as long as he's known to think about these things, has known that he's a witch. And so that trilogy is about Aster exploring that side of himself, sharing that with his family, kind of facing like opposition from them, but also kind of learning that his unique strengths lie in being a witch boy. It is about him expanding his community and meeting more people who are sort of gender nonconforming, both in and outside of his family and his magical community. When I made that trilogy, the queerness in it is very, very metaphorical in a way. There's some textual things, but a lot of it, I really wanted to sort of approach it from this place of being young and not quite knowing the words for yourself yet, but knowing what you want to be and what kind of role you want to play in the world. So that was my exploration of the Witch Boy. When it came to making my next book, I knew that I wanted to be much more textual with it. So The Girl from the Sea is set on a tiny island in maritime Nova Scotia. It is about Morgan Kwan, a 15-year-old girl who knows that she's gay, but is not ready to come out to herself, her family, her friends, not ready to come out to anyone until she goes to college and leaves this place. Of course, plans always get messed up. And when she meets Kelty, a shape-shifting seal selkie from the ocean, and they fall hard for each other, all kinds of secrets will bubble up and wreck all of her plans. And it's colored beautifully by Marta Laiho. And so I have been really enjoying the reception to this book so far. Getting to sort of put a little bit more of my heart into a story like this and be really personal has been very meaningful to me. And so if you've read it, I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Molly. We'll now hear from Dan Abdo and Jason Patterson. For the past 10 years, award-winning duo Dan and Jason have developed numerous animated campaigns, network TV and web series, and critically acclaimed commercial work. Their extensive portfolio has garnered them industry-wide recognition, while their humorous sensibility and diverse skill set has landed them jobs for top global brands. Dan and Jason have set up properties at 20th Century Fox, Disney, and Nickelodeon, as well as a feature animated film through Paramount Pictures. The well-versed storytellers have developed original content for a wide variety of platforms, including print, Nickelodeon Comics and The New Yorker, theater, Polobolus, and digital. The floor is yours, Dan and Jason.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Dan. And I think Jason's going to pop in a second.
Oh, you know what? I think my video's been disabled.
Well, that's Jason's voice.
Sorry.
Thanks so much for having us. We're so excited to be here. Yeah, so Jason and I have been writing and drawing cartoons together since we were in high school. We actually met in high school together like a million years ago and kind of fell in love with making stories together and never stopped. And this is our first middle grade graphic novel, BARB the Last Berserker. We're super, super excited about this book and cannot wait for everyone to check it out. So basically it's a story about Barb who she thinks that she wants to be this like heroic warrior. Like her mom was this really like legendary warrior, and she ends up kind of being thrust into this insane situation where she's like in the middle of this war between humans and monsters. And basically it's kind of about her journey of figuring out like what kind of hero does she want to be. It's like as she kind of gets deeper into the story, she's presented with these facts that are making her question things, and she's like this person who's kind of always making up her own mind. You know, it's like she's always questioning things and always looking at the situation, seeing like, is this the best way to do it? She kind of has this like overdeveloped sense of fairness, which illustrates itself in the way where like she has no tolerance for bullies and is constantly like sticking her neck out for people, and it gets her into all these insane situations. But yeah, it's really fun, and it's also like full of evil sorcerers and giants and sword fights and all this like epic crazy adventure and fun silly comedy. So yeah, we're really, really excited for everyone to check it out, and we have totally loved this book and love this character. And yeah, I don't know, did I forget anything, Jason? How'd that sound?
No, that was great, Dan. Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things that Dan and I always try to bring to our projects is kind of like like Dan said, we've been friends forever. And so one of my favorite things about this story is Barb develops this friendship with a 400-pound Yeti. And in her world, you know, monsters and humans don't really get along. There's kind of this long, ageless war that's been going on, but she ends up befriending this Yeti whose name is Pork Chop. And they're a great dynamic in the story because they kind of come at things from different points of view. Like Barb is totally selfless and wants to save people and stop bullies. And Pork Chop really wants to fill up his own belly, and he only looks out for himself. In fact, he's actually like a thief at the start of the story, right? He robs from people. But once they kind of fall in together, the story, it's so much fun. It really comes to life. And it's so much fun to see these two characters kind of bounce off each other. And one of the fun facts about Yetis is they give great hugs, and every once in a while Barb needs a really big hug, and he's perfect for that. Okay, thank you guys. We can't wait for you to check it out.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dan and Jason, and a big thank you to all of you for your insightful presentations. From here, we'll now begin the panel portion of the webinar, so you can all enable your video, and we'll get started. And I will do that too, so you can see my face. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Okay, so now we'll get started with the panel portion. I have questions, which, you know, it was a little bit difficult to find questions to like cover all of your books because they're very, very different. But I wanted to start it off with something really general that I think you all can speak to, which is, what is it about comics specifically that makes it the best medium for telling your stories? And Huda, do you mind if we start with you on this one?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all.
Great, take it away.
Well, as Sarah mentioned in my bio, I've loved comics since I was a kid. It's actually how I learned to speak English. Our parents only spoke to us in Arabic when we were kids. And so I started with Garfield and eventually like Calvin and Hobbes and that. And, you know, the facial expressions, the ability to present a message and make people laugh at the same time. And having gone through a lot of things in my life, humor was just such a great way to cope with a lot of stress, and it was just a great escape. And so it felt almost natural for me to gravitate towards comics, and so for me, that's kind of why it just resonated. And to this day, I just love, you know, it's almost therapeutic. I love being able to communicate my story and to hear other people tell their stories through comics. I mean, just the facial expressions that you can, and the imagery that you can, you know, present to the reader is, you know, you can't really do that in text, and you hope that people will get what you're talking about. And sometimes you can land a joke with just a facial expression, and I love being able to do that. But I'd love to hear what the other panelists have to say as well. That was just my experience.
Molly, you're nodding a lot. Do you want to chime in here?
I'm a nodder on panels, but I totally agree. It's very cathartic to there's something about comics where you're taking your exact view of the world. Like everyone has their own unique drawing style, which is so cool that we all sort of see the same thing. We're in the same world and we translate it through our head and it comes out our hand and it's unique and it sort of reflects our interiority and how unique that is. And so there's something really special about reading comics and just sort of getting to see how someone else sees the world. And in terms of making them, I'm a really visual thinker and storyteller. It always kind of comes to me in pictures and every other kind of visual storytelling. Like I work in animation, I have done work in film. It requires so many people to come together, which is its own like special thing. But a comic is really special because you really can just sit down and have one person or like two or just a small handful of people make this visual story. So there's an intimacy to them that I really love. And of all of the work I've done, I really feel like the comics I've made are the closest to my heart and the ones that are the closest kind of representation of how I see the world and what I'm excited about, because I just get to sort of think it and write it and then draw it. And it's like, it's this really intimate process. So that is what I love about comics.
Cool. Does anybody else want to volunteer to chime in?
Yeah, I think that a lot of what Huda and Molly said is so resonant for me. Like, also, I grew up reading Garfield, and it was my kind of first introduction to comics. And I love the combination of visuals and text. You know, I think that it's really, really powerful. And what Molly was saying, I always think of it as this very unique opportunity to be immersed in somebody else's, not only their words, but also how they maybe picture things in their mind, right? As an artist, I'm such a visual person. If somebody I always say, please don't describe anything gross to me, because I will immediately start picturing it in my mind and I just don't need that. And so I love that kind of unique, it's so unique in terms of a medium that you get to get that vision visually of how somebody pictures something, how they want it to be shown on the page. And so I love it. And I feel like, you know, there's really nothing else like it, so.
Savannah and Jenny, pertinent to this question, I'm curious about, because we're talking a lot about like visualizing someone's world directly, and Savannah, you adapted Jenny's novel, and Jenny, you have written comics yourself. So I'm curious about how you're responding to some of these things that the other panelists are saying.
Sorry, brain freeze. No, I've always been on the writer side of the collaboration. So I work with my brother Matt on Baby Mouse and Sunny, and then working with Savannah on Turtle was amazing. You know, I think what she did, which was so great, was part of a problem with being the author sometimes is you're too close to the material and you get like stuck in the details. She was able to take like a real like a top look at the book and pull out the really good plot points, the real emotional moments where I might have been a little too like, oh, but I love that one little scene, but it really wouldn't quite work in comics. So she had a much clearer view than I do.
I don't think that's true.
It's totally true.
But no, I mean, I think adapting a novel is, you know, it just really shows how different they really are, the mediums, because, you know, there's a lot of times where I couldn't fall back on narration and I really had to just push Turtle's expressions. And, you know, also just with the pacing of the book and like sort of hinting and pushing people to take time to think about what happened, or, you know, take time to like stew in what Turtle is experiencing, you know, because I, you know, couldn't just like start, you know, describing things in a novel or like giving the reader some time to rest. You know, I just like had to sort of ruminate in the setting and stuff, but I mean, I had a really great time adapting it. It was really fun. It wasn't very hard. I think that, you know, I kind of just loving comics since I was a kid, really always kind of thought that way. And also whenever I would read a novel would be like, how would this look like as a comic or as an animation or something? But coming from what Molly was saying about how, you know, being like a kid in a rural area, and you can just do all this stuff by yourself, and you can make something that like feels really epic just with you. And like, that's something about comics that just feels like super special. And, there's really nothing like it. And there's so many unique tricks and unique techniques you can use to like, kind of not manipulate the reader, but kind of push the reader into like knowing how you want to, present this story. But yeah, I mean, Turtle was great. It was really fun to do.
Dan and Jason, I want to give you a chance to respond to this question too. You were nodding a lot just now, Dan. I feel like you are having some thoughts.
Yeah, no, these are all such amazing answers too. Yeah, I mean, it's thinking about it, it's like, I love like laughing and joking around and like being silly. And like, I feel like comics kind of afford that opportunity. I mean, it's like, those are like comedy and adventure are kind of the two types of stories that like I'm really attracted to. And it's like comics allow us to have these like really silly, really goofy little quiet moments, but then also allow us to get really big and really epic and have these like grand fantasies, and it's like, I mean, Jason and I have been working in animation for a long time, and it's like, which is also amazing and collaborative, and it's really cool, but like there's all these restrictions, right? There's all this stuff that like you don't have time or money or manpower or labor to do. And it's like comics, it's like all of a sudden we're like, okay, now we're in the mountains, and now we're in like this like huge fighting pit where they have to fight this giant grub of death, and it's just like, we can do whatever we want, and it's amazing. It's really fun.
Yeah, and just there is a lot, just to chime in, there is a lot of drawing in comics, which is awesome. Like, drawing is so much fun. It's like a different part of your brain than writing, I think. It's like there's the writing part and the drawing part, and when they come together, there's a kind of unique magic, I think, in comics. And one of the ways Dan and I work is we'll write out the outline, and then we'll kind of go into thumbs pretty quick before we know all the dialogue and stuff. And kind of, it allows us, as we're creating it, to kind of live in the moment of the page and kind of see like, oh, it'd be cool if there's like a joke here, or maybe we need an extra panel there. And it's kind of like, you're kind of building a story up from the ground floor. And it kind of, I don't know, like you guys were saying, it's like you can kind of do it yourself, which is kind of amazing. It's kind of like you get to put like a little blockbuster film down on paper or something, which is really fun. It's really cool.
I know this might be too pretentious, but sometimes I do kind of think of it. It is kind of like the cinema of the mind, right? It's like, especially like when you're like in bed before you're about to go to sleep and you're reading a comic book, and it's like all of a sudden it's like all this stuff is just like, it's like a front row seat. It's for this like amazing film. I don't know. I feel like it's totally unique that way too. It's like it's almost like a direct. It's like a direct communication with the author and artist. It's like this direct road.
Speaking of audience, when I came up with this question, really, I was mostly thinking of Huda, because I know that you started your comic largely on Instagram, but I know several of you also share a lot of your art on social media. And I'm wondering how that has shaped your storytelling, if at all, or the way you approach your comics. What has that afforded you as a comics creator, sharing your art in that way? And Huda, we can start with you again, if that's okay.
Yeah. Well, for me, I had to be able to tell a joke or make a point in 4 panels, like 4 to 6 panels. So that was really hard, but also really fun, really challenging to get, be able to edit it that way or to tell it that way. Knowing that I'm getting responses to my comics immediately, like as I post, is also, it could be exciting and it could be unnerving and scary and fun. I try not to be reactive with my posts, because I am trying to be very authentic and very just true to whatever the experiences are that I'm having, or to represent this group of people that I feel like are not being represented. And so in that way, it definitely, it's been a struggle, but knowing and seeing that people really like hearing these stories and they can connect, and it's really not for just this really niche group of people that I thought it was going to be for. I mean, for example, my webcomic series is called Yes, I'm Hot in This, and I truly thought it was only going to appeal to other women who wear the hijab, who wear the headscarf, and get that, yeah, we're always hot in this, and get the jokes that I tell, and but I think that, you know, what it really did was, for myself anyway, it helped me understand that it was really about feeling like an outsider, not feeling like I fit in, not feeling like my voice could be heard or would be heard, and knowing that there were so many different kind of people out there who felt the same way, and that sometimes what I write or what I draw, also it's okay if it doesn't appeal to everyone, because sometimes it won't, and it's fine. Sometimes it's okay to write to just that niche group of people who really wish to hear those stories. And I'll get people who say, I don't get it. I'll be like, that's okay. You don't have to. and you know, just let me laugh. and so in that sense, I guess that's how it's kind of affected my art. It's made me a lot more confident in telling the story the way I want it to be told.
That's really interesting. And anybody else who feels like they share a lot, do you have a similar experience that it's helped you feel a little bit more confident in the stories you're telling?
I feel like it's both a little bit. And I love the, like, I love like going back to just like why comics are so great. I feel like there is this universality where you're like, here is my niche experience, but also I'm presenting myself as a cartoon, and it's so easy to project on a cartoon. So it's a really lovely way to like get to see other people's experiences and like really connect with them. But like, I feel like with social media, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword for me, where I think you can really see and feel that there is like such an eager audience, but also you can't let yourself be completely driven by them. At least like me personally, like, because if I end up just making work that I know that the audience wants, like, I won't grow as an artist. And so it's an interesting balance for me between work that I can post online that I know is for specific people, and that I can really play with the format, which is really fun. And sort of play with like making like fan stories and kind of just like things that I couldn't really publish. And so that's really exciting, but then also recognizing that a graphic novel is its own labor and like takes a long time, and it's more complex than anything you could post on Twitter or on Instagram, and that there's something really special about that too. The expectation that like people will read this offline, they will buy it, they will have a physical interaction with the book, and or like on their Kindle, and like they're not reacting to every single page, and that's like its own really special thing. So I've kind of like really grown to love both of them, and to recognize that I sort of need both of them to like keep growing as an artist.
Yeah, and like having an audience is so fun to play with sometimes. Like I've worked on a webcomic for a long time that I don't update very often, which I foolishly added it to my bio, and I'm like, I don't update this thing. Why did I do that? But I really enjoy making it, and it's definitely something that I could never publish. It's like really long form, and it's a scrolling webcomic. It's just, you know, it's sort of like the meanderings of a romance fan, and but like having the audience interaction is just so amazing. And also like getting mail from people, like Huda was saying, like being like this story resonates with me so much, and like one of my characters is a fat character, and like when people are like, I've never seen like a character that looks like him that's like so loved and like wanted, it's just like, you know, that definitely like gives me motivation and like just makes me so happy. And I just, you know, when times where I feel like, you know, why am I doing this, or like, you know, this webcomic doesn't make me any money, but like emails like that makes me like feel like, oh no, there's a reason to do this, and like, oh man, it's just the best, you know.
It does seem to me like it is, so social media in particular is a good way to reach an audience that you might not otherwise reach. And I think it's useful for all the librarians who are watching this panel right now to know that there is an entire universe of artwork that exists outside the physical books on the shelves from a lot of comics creators, because the barrier to entry for like a webcomic or like posting comics on Instagram is really pretty low. And it's amazing to me to see just like the wealth of really interesting, cool comics art that just is like around and available. And I think that's a really exciting thing about comics as a reader.
Yeah, that's something that I love. I have like a lot of really young queer people sort of in my fan base. And I get messages all the time where they're like, I wish I could buy your book, but I am a child and I can't like have a book like this in my house. Like my parents, I cannot have my parents see that I have this like lesbian book in my house. And so it is like, there's something incredibly special about being able to be like, okay, here is stuff for you. All you need is an internet connection to access it. And I think that that's like a really important level of accessibility that's always important to think about. And I think since we're on a librarian panel, also to like think about that and to be like, how can you have books that kids can access in your library that will not necessarily out them to their family if they can't do that. So that's always really exciting to me.
Yeah, and I think I have a 14-year-old, and so she and all her friends, they just love webtoons. And I feel like webtoons now for, tweens is the gateway drug to comics for long form. They're parallel lines, but she gets up every morning, checks in, reading the comics, and they love it. And it's so many different genres. So then they, do the same thing, go stalk their favorite authors on Instagram. But it's amazing that there's this culture now that's being built up around comics, and kids are so excited about it. And it's hard to get a 14-year-old excited about anything, let me tell you. So
that's great. So I originally pitched that question also to Dan and Jason, and I think it's interesting because you both have worked in like a variety of media beyond just printed comics, and I know you do a little bit online too, but I'm curious about like how like thinking about your art in these different venues like affects the way you write a comic as opposed to writing something else.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everything people have been saying, I've kind of been nodding and agreeing with, but I feel like the web is like this little, it's like a little stand-up, it's like a little stand-up club or something where you can just go on stage and just try something short and weird and not think too much about it and just see how, maybe people will hate it, maybe they won't get it, maybe no one will see it, but it's kind of like, I don't know, as an artist, and especially a comic book artist, I think we all are a little bit introverted, right? It's kind of an introverted art form. Like somebody was saying, like, you kind of are, the comics fulfill that kind of lonely side of you. And they're like friends that you get to kind of hang out with. And I think it's important for us as creators to be able to kind of like stand on that little stage and say something. And maybe it's the wrong thing, or maybe it's a great thing that resonates with someone, but it's important to kind of practice your voice, I guess, kind of like try new material, I guess. I don't know, Dan.
Yeah, no, I think that's really spot on. And it's funny, it's like we love to post stuff online and post stuff on our social media, but it's like I feel like I'm constantly trying to decide, like, should we be working on our book or should we be posting stuff on social media? And it's like, it's kind of this balance. And I feel like they both serve different functions, right? It's like Jason was saying, like social media allows us to try stuff out and kind of like, if we need to gauge in, if we're like, are people going to dig this? Is this making any sense? Like you can kind of get a little bit of a gauge on that. Because we've definitely posted a bunch of stuff that we're then like, this stinks, and we abandon it. And like it's kind of nice, it's like we're not wasting all of our time. But then it's like I'll go weeks without posting stuff, which makes me feel terrible. But it's like we also got to get pages done, and we got to like get outlines done and do all this other stuff. So it's great and awesome, but also stress inducing, like everything.
Can I say, I love that you said that. I love posting stupid stuff.
Yeah.
That I know nobody else is gonna find funny. And like, you gotta read it because you're following me. I'm like that, just like a recurring poster character. Had nothing to do with anything. It was just hilarious.
I know, it's like we were doing this like long form webcomic about this like dog space bounty hunter, and like we were kind of just like passing stuff back and forth and wasn't really making sense, and we would get all these comments like, what does this mean, what's happening? And we're like, you figure it out, I don't know. But it was really fun, it was really great.
So I'd like to shift gears a little bit back to the books that we are all here to talk about too. So Jenny and Savannah, would you mind talking a little bit about your collaborative process? Savannah, how did you approach sort of like crystallizing the novel into pictures? And Jenny, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so my approach was, I read the book like many times, like 4 times, many times, more than that probably.
There's going to be a test.
And it's quick. So, I mean, I had a great time. It wasn't like laborious or anything. And then I put it and just made it into a comic book script. And the novel itself is pretty episodic, and it really lent itself well to being a graphic novel. there was only like, there wasn't really a lot I had to work differently. There was just some stuff that, didn't make it in. It was a little too specific, or, we didn't have the page count. Or I think in the beginning is a little bit more switched around just to give sort of like a exposition flashback and then into the story kind of moment. But yeah, that was mainly it. And then, went from script. I did actually do a whole script just to make it easy for Jenny to kind of get what I was going, and, for the editors to understand. And then did thumbs and pencils, inks.
It was totally painless. She did all the work. Best experience I ever had. No, seriously, her first draft was amazing. I think she did a second draft with like niggly points from, the editor, and then gone. I mean, my own, usually when I write a script, I'm looking at 4 or 5 drafts. So it was amazing to watch her do this. And she said this is the first time she's done it too. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I've had plenty of time to practice in my brain.
One of the things I really like about Turtle in Paradise, and also Jukebox and The Girl from the Sea, is just like this really rich sense of location. And I wonder if I could have Savannah and Nidhi and Molly talk a little bit about how you evoke a location. And Nidhi, why don't we start with you? You haven't had a chance to talk in a little bit.
I am just really enjoying listening to everybody else and just kind of like nodding along. I feel like, you hear like almost like different versions of your own mind. But so Jukebox, because it takes place in all these different eras, it was a lot of research. So it was a lot of Google images, a lot of watching like the same documentary, the same concert, the same women's march over and over. And to really get a sense of both the place. So like I would choose, let's say, and I wanted to bounce around the country. So there's Boston, there's Chicago, there's DC, there's San Francisco in the 70s. And so all that was very research based. But also one of my favorite parts of Sense of Place was how people talk, right? And a lot of this slang that we start using now has origins in like the 30s or origins in the 70s. And so that I had this like laundry list of slang, and I was like, okay, I can't use all of this. I really want to. I want this character who is from this time period to just like be like speaking in slang the whole time. But I couldn't do that, obviously. So I had to pull back from a lot of the research. So it's kind of like, that information gathering, and then seeing how does it fit within the story, and how can I make sure that that sense of place is communicated not only visually, but also in how people are talking.
Molly, how about you?
Yeah, for The Girl from the Sea, I set it in a really specific place. My parents are both public school teachers, and so we would have the summers off, and we would go up to Nova Scotia and spend like the whole summer on this like tiny little fishing house on an island. It was like incredibly remote, just like no plumbing, no internet. It was like a lot, but incredible. And so that place is like just deep within me. Like it is like, that is like where I go when I dream. Like it is so close to my heart. And so, yeah, it was felt really natural to set a story there. And I think like the way that I made the queerness more textual in Girl from the Sea and more specific, as opposed to the Witch Boy series, I also did the same thing with the location, where I've been really interested in just figuring out how to make stories that are positive and that are, good representation and like sort of like positive forces of like social justice in the world. And something I've been realizing is that like the more specific you can be, the more clearly you can tell people's stories. So being very specific about the place and really doing my research and trying to make it, I think that like those things like in a surprising way, it often ends up being more universal when you really narrow in. So yeah, it was just delightful to get to kind of, this place is just, I just love it so much. And it's truly the most beautiful place in the world. So I didn't need to do a ton of like visual research because I kind of could just see it. But yeah, there was something special also about taking a place that is very personal to me. Like Morgan lives in my parents' house. It is on my parents' island. They go to the little nearby town. Like everything is like exactly where I've been. But then putting someone else in it was like, for me, I'm a little scared to do actual autobio, there was something really cool about sort of using this place as like the stage for a very personal story, but it's not exactly starring me. So that was really fun as well. Yeah.
Cool. So Savannah, you've never actually been to Key West. So how did you manage to evoke such like a rich, vivid sense of a place where you've never been, as opposed to Molly, who has this place like baked into her bones?
Yeah, so I had the benefit of Jenny's wealth of research that she had for the initial novel. So I had a lot to go on. And then I did a lot of my own research too. So just a lot of looking and trying to find old pictures as best as I could. And, you know, the good thing about Key West is that it's really not that different. A lot of it's kind of the same. So you can kind of like Google Maps it and figure out. And, you know, there was like hurricanes and fires and all this stuff that did change the general layout of the town. But a lot of it's the same. So the houses look a lot, you know, they look similarly to the way they do now. And I also grew up in a small town by the beach, so I kind of like pulled from my experience there. And then, you know, maps are really important to me. I really wanted to know how everything connected in the town. And so I tried to find some old maps of Key West, and I was able to find some like Sanborn maps of the town, which are old like fire safety maps that they used to do. And I found a 1940s map of the town as well. And so I was really able to sort of like see where Turtle went and like plot and like, okay, so that would be that far to walk, and sort of kind of understand where they would be walking and like what the scenery would look like. And stuff like that that's not very apparent in the book, but is just very important to me so that I know, you know, where everybody's going, where everybody is. And then, you know, and then anything, you know, I had an initial call with Jenny that was like, I have some very, very specific questions for you about like how the houses are painted, and like, do they have bathrooms, and like, do they hang like what kind of decorations, and like should some houses be older in era, and then should some yeah. So there was a lot of just research like that to like kind of pinpoint the town and kind of get the general vibe.
And I'm just chiming in. I think what else helped so much is Savannah and Lark Bien, our colorist, really nailed the colors of Key West. Like there's just something about the sky here, the way the houses are painted, the color of the water. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, Lark did an absolutely amazing job, and like I learned so much from her, and she's just like a comics legend to me. So like I was just like, whatever you say, it sounds great. I'm happy to follow along. But also like it was so cool to work with her because like she's just always thinking creatively and thinking like how to make this comic book experience unique and how to make it memorable to kids. And so there was times where she would just like float these crazy ideas about the coloring, and you know the publisher wouldn't go for it, but I was like, but it's such a good idea. Like, let's do rose color holds on the whole book. And I was like, yeah, that would be really memorable. But but she's just so great. So I had a really great time working with her.
Cool. So Huda and Dana and Jason, one of the things that I really appreciated about your books is how funny they are. Like I laughed a lot when I was reading them in prep for this. And I wonder if you could each talk a little bit about how you approach comedic timing. Huda, you touched on this a little bit when you were talking about comic strips, because you can like feel that really tight energy in your jokes. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about your approach to comedy in your comics.
I wish I had like a good scientific answer, like the science of humor or the science of joke telling.
Humor is the hardest thing to talk about, I think. It's so hard.
Like, how do you tell someone who's like, how can I be funny? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know how to talk about it, but it's just, you know, my whole life, like I said, humor was always just very natural. Anytime I told a story, I always saw it through the lens of humor. It just was something that I love to do, is make people laugh. And you know, God, I don't know. And so the challenge of trying to fit a joke into a short amount of space, or a short amount of time and a short amount of panels, was it makes it like the challenge is kind of part of like what forces you to find the joke, and be able to make people laugh. And then testing it out like on my husband, who doesn't really get a lot of my jokes. He gets some of them, but like if he doesn't get the main joke, sometimes I'll be like, well, it's not for you. And other times I'll be like, okay, I need to rework this one. This should be for the masses. And if you don't get it, I should, you know, it's not funny. But I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I would love to hear what Dan and Jason have to say. It's just, I think the more comics I read, and you just kind of like pick up on some of the timing and the pacing of the jokes. And then it really is just your own personal like preference, like what you find funny, and you hope other people find it funny too. And then you're really like surprised and happy when you're like, oh yeah, I'm not a weirdo, you find it funny too. Oh man, but yeah.
Well, no, I think you said earlier, like you trying to tell a joke in 4 squares. Like that's such a great challenge for somebody to practice at home or to try it on your own, because I think you're right. A lot of a joke is in the setup and the build up, and then the punchline is really kind of like releases the tension that you've created. It sounds like a formula, but you're right. It's like there's like a chemistry, which also sounds like a formula, but it is. It's like it's kind of like a magical thing that happens when you rub all these ingredients together, and then it pops and you're like, whoa, it worked. Okay, on to the next one, you know? And it's, I think you can't be afraid of failing. You can't be afraid of making a bad joke. We have a running gag in BARB where she wants to be able to tell jokes. She kind of wants to tell those classic jokes, like a setup punchline. Why isn't everyone laughing? And she just can't quite get those jokes to land. Like she doesn't understand why everyone else doesn't think they're funny. But she is funny, and she's funny when she's just kind of not trying to be funny. Which I think is also a weird ingredient in humor, is the more you try to be funny. And as a dad, I know I try to be funny with my kids a lot. And it's not funny, it's terrible. So I don't know. I feel like I didn't really answer the question, but
yeah, no, I mean, I think you guys are both totally right. I mean, one thing I would add is that I feel like Jason and I are really lucky because we kind of get to try to crack each other up. You know what I mean? It's like Jason will do something that I'm just like, it just have me in stitches, and I'm like, there, that's it. That's the way we have to, like, that's what the dialogue should be. Like, that's the wording of it, you know? Or like vice versa. It's like sometimes it's like we'll just rework a joke over and over until it's like working for both of us, you know what I mean? And it's kind of this thing too. I feel like we kind of figured this out with BARB, with the humor, and in just with like what the story is about and the character. It's like we just are trying to entertain ourselves. Like it is for kids, and it's also for parents who are reading to kids. It's also for, you know, 14-year-old nerds. But it's really for us, you know? And it's like, and if it's making us laugh, and if like we're excited and entertained by it, it's like, I feel like we're on the right track.
Yeah, I liked it's funny, Molly was talking about like creating a space or a place that's really specific. Savannah was too, right? And I feel like the more specific, like you guys were saying, the more specific about the setting, like the more the story will resonate, like the more real it feels. And I feel like that kind of applies to humor too. Like the more specific the joke, you know, if the punchline is a car, you should change it so that it's like a 1973 Datsun or something. Like that's funnier for some reason. Like the more specific the joke, the funnier it'll be. So I think specificity, I can't say that word, specificity. Oh no, and these are librarians, oh God. But you know, the more specific you are, the better, the funnier it is. And that probably works on every aspect of the comic, you know, from the backgrounds to the character's point of view to everything. So being specific helps.
Great. Yeah, I knew that was going to be a hard question to answer, but I'm just so curious if people have insight into comedic timing, because I know it's one of those, when you were talking, Jason, about like chemistry, the word that popped up in my head is alchemy, because it's like it's sort of science but also sort of magic. But yeah, that's a tough one. I admit it was a tough one. So we are getting close to the end of our time here, so I want to ask a few like rapid fire questions, if that's okay. So we're gonna turn the attention away from the books that you have written in your own work, and we're gonna talk about some of your influences, if that's okay. So I'm just gonna quickly call on everybody to answer each of these questions, and then we will wrap up our time here. So what was the comic that made you want to make comics? And Nidhi, why don't we start with you?
American Born Chinese.
Nice. Molly.
Love and Rockets by Jaime Hernandez.
Very cool. Savannah.
Ranma 1/2 by Rumiko Takahashi.
Great. Jenny.
Prince Valiant by Hal Foster. Old school.
Huda.
Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson.
Jason.
I would say Calvin and Hobbes, but I'm gonna say Tintin by Hergé.
All right. And Dan.
Eastman and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Cool. That's a really good group of comics. I love it. Okay. So what are your biggest influences for your stories that aren't books? So Savannah, I'm gonna start with you on this one.
Films, definitely. I don't know. Movies.
Okay. Nidhi, you're next.
My family. I'm working on an early reader comic right now. It hasn't been announced or anything, but it was completely and totally inspired by my daughter.
Cute. Molly.
I would say like nonfiction stuff, books about things from history, especially in science. Also, like I love listening to advice podcasts and hearing people's like crazy drama and like the lessons to draw from it. And then I also watch a lot of reality TV, and I feel like there's a lot of very human drama there that I really draw inspiration from.
Cool. Jenny.
Team Real Housewives, Molly. Love you, bravo. For my books, a lot of family history. So I love finding like weird little stories from my family's past.
Cool. Huda.
Real life. People coming up at me if I'm hot.
Jason.
Definitely film, but also music. I feel like music is a great way to kind of like inspire yourself. And it's funny, like drawing and writing BARB, I listen to a lot of Taylor Swift. I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan.
And Dan.
Yeah, I would just add television to that too. Like I'm totally obsessed with like all this amazing like long form storytelling and television. There's so much good stuff out there right now.
Cool. Okay, this is the last one. What books would you like to see next to yours on a library display? And Jason, I'll start with you.
Oh man, I don't know, maybe Spider-Man. As a kid, I always loved Spider-Man. Seeing our book next to Spider-Man feels like my 8-year-old self's brain would explode.
You can see it in like the really long limbs, I think, in BARB. Huda, how about you?
Oh man. I think people like Raina Telgemeier and Svetlana Chomakova and Jean Yang. I think that just to be with them and be like, my story is being told alongside theirs, that would be great.
Cool. Nidhi, how about you?
I just want a whole shelf of brown characters, just like a shelf full of brown characters made by brown women, and that would make me so happy.
That's awesome.
Jenny, how about you?
It'd be fun to be with like the nonfiction kids, like Nathan Hale, Hazardous Tales. Here for history, a little history.
Molly.
I feel like I came up with so many incredible like young queer artists who are now like having books come out, and I'm always really bad at thinking of names, but I also would love to sort of see my comics like in the YA section of just like YA prose, because I think that sort of like recognizing that it's its own genre would be really cool.
Cool. Dan.
I'm super inspired by Hilda and Bone, and I also really love Jeffrey Brown. I can kind of see like all those kind of fitting together. Like that'd be a good like triple feature or something,
Cool. And Savannah, we'll end with you.
Yeah, I think just seeing my graphic novel with other graphic novels is just in itself really amazing. Or just like in the store, I'm just like, wow, look, that's me. But yeah, definitely people like Raina and Jean and all those amazing creators. It's just like mind blowing. Absolutely.
Can I say one quick thing? We got someone sent us on social media, a librarian sent us a picture of one of our books with like the library card in the back.
That's
And it was like something, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like seeing your book with that in it was like, I don't know, it just made it feel real all of a sudden, it was kind of an insane thing.
Getting the copies that are like falling apart at signings is always the best feeling, where it's just like, you've read this so many times, the spine is broken. And I remember loving books that much when I was a kid. It's really cool.
Well, I'm afraid that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for this great conversation. This was so fun. It's been a real pleasure to talk to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys. That's awesome.
So on Monday, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's title list, certification of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit www.booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like the ones you see here. As we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, Graphic Novels in Libraries Month is officially here. And even though July is almost over, there's still time to celebrate with even more webinars and author illustrator panels, a Read Graphic sweepstakes, podcasts, and our guide to graphic novels issue, which is free and open to everyone on booklistonline.com. For the complete list of this month's festivities, including links to everything mentioned here, visit bit.ly/GNJuly 2021. Not yet a subscriber? Pair the print reading experience with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com and lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of this special webinar offer to get Booklist for only $75. Thank you again for joining us for today's webinar, and one more huge thank you to our panelists and to our sponsors, Random House Children's Books, Macmillan Children's Publishing Group, Penguin Young Readers, Scholastic, and Simon & Schuster Children's Publishing. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.
Thank you.